Hello and welcome. I am the Restless Kaiser, and once again we are modelling for advantage. So today is going to be a video packed with unfounded wishlisting and wild speculation about the future of 9th edition for the Warhammer game. You probably know the fake James Workshop has released a video with 9 points that we should look for rules changes in the new edition. So we as a team had a bit of a chat. Different people have taken different segments. We're going to go through those 9 things and see what we think about them, what we might hope from them, or what our fears are, and our hopes and wishes for 9th edition. So first up, let's hear from Clueless Mike from Team Clueless 40k on the first point.
Hi all, Clueless Mike here. So, 9th edition, I'm very excited by all the new stuff they've released and announced. So we're just going to discuss a few of the bits now. So first off, in their little preview video, they said that they've done a load more playtesting, a load of polishing the rules, making it a really fast and up-to-date rule set. I don't think personally they're going to have changed a huge amount. All the core bits of the rules are going to stay the same. They announced today that none of your books need replacing, other than obviously the main rule book. So I think they've probably just gone in and they've taken into account all the errata, all the playtest stuff that's gone on. They're going to tweak, I suspect, the rules that a load of people don't particularly like or make bad play experiences. Things like, I think the character rule is going to be tweaked slightly. I think flyers are going to have various tweaking the fly special rule, various things like that. And it's just going to be a better game, hopefully. That's what we all hope, so fingers crossed.
Thank you for that, Michael. I think with everything we're going to see here today, the devil is in the detail, but it does look a lot like 9th edition is more of an 8.5, a kind of revision of the rules without fundamental changes. I mean, I say that, it's very easy for them to make game changes that are quite radical to the game, which they haven't even mentioned, like, you know, changing the relationship between the points of models and weapons, for example, would profoundly change the game, I think, and they wouldn't necessarily mention it in one of these items. But anyway, let's have a look at number 2 on this list, which is Join the Crusade. This is their new options for narrative play, and a lot is being made of this, the idea that you can get a Space Marine Sergeant, can get killed and come back next week as a Dreadnought, or that you earn battle honours and you kind of level up your characters. I don't know what people are expecting this to be, but I think there've been several, you can customise your models. There's been a battle wagon, there's been a Land Raider, and there's been Space Marine Captains, and it's virtually unplayed because it's horribly unbalanced. You're not going to be able to go down to your local store and say, oh yeah, I've got this Scout Sergeant that I've been playing for 6 months, and now he's a Terminator Captain, but he only cost me 12 points, and he's got all these extra abilities or whatever. I don't think that's what it's going to be at all, and I don't really need Games Workshop to tell me that if one of my characters dies, I can bring him back next week as a Dreadnought. That said, for in-house play with your mates, that's a different thing, isn't it? Maybe as part of a league or an escalation league with a small group of people, they're all coming at it from just a fun perspective. And I think one of the things you're likely to see on the channel, unless this is garbage, is something on this narrative crusading, because I think we'd like to give it a go, embracing the fact that it may be terribly out of balance. Anyway, let's hear from Mr. Johnny B on his thoughts on narrative gaming and 9th edition.
Hi boys and girls, comes to me for part 2, which is the narrative side of things and what they are calling Crusade. Now, I'm a little bit excited about this. I've seen Workshop do a few systems like this before in the past, 5th edition being the most memorable one, where you could earn battle honours and experience, but I don't think it ever really saw any sort of table time back then. It certainly didn't for me. And will it this time round? Well, I'm kind of hoping so. I'm excited mainly because there's a real potential for the channel here, especially with the likes of Clueless Mike and original James Workshop, to actually get some proper good games in. Link them together, have some fun with it, opens up a lot of modelling potential as well. So I'm hopeful that it's a relatively balanced, solid system, but I'm sure it's just going to be absolutely exploited to the utmost. I've actually started on a new little army because I am quite into this Crusade malarkey. So I'd like to show you. Scout Sergeant Ivan Ivanovich. If we just go down and have a little look, I've got my little thing this time. Boop. So here he is after game 1. This is Scout Sergeant Ivan Ivanovich. Obviously he's had a few minor alterations from the experience he gained in that first combat scenario. But genuinely, I am actually looking forward to this and what it will bring in a balance to the channel and what we can do narratively on the channel also. So yeah, anyways, on to point 3.
One of the biggest things they announced to me, and one of the things I'm really looking forward to seeing what they do, is that they said more command points for all. But I'm hoping that this isn't just tied into here, have a load more command points. I suspect it's going to be tied into how we choose detachments. They also mentioned that there'll be more super soldiers, which I'm hoping they're going to do it in this way. This is just a bit of a guesstimation. I don't have any actual knowledge of this, but I suspect what's going to happen is that you're going to get a certain number of command points per points in your army. So let's say they keep the points the same as they are at the moment. So you're playing a 2,000 point game, you'll get 20 command points. Playing a 1,000 point game, you'll get 10. There'll be some calculation along those lines. But then you choose a detachment to base your army round. And then if you want any extra detachments, I suspect you're now going to have to pay command points for that, which I think is a great way of doing it. Because at the minute, command points are king. Everybody wants as many command points as possible. And the way to do that is to take bare bones detachments. You very rarely see a detachment, say the main detachment, the battalion detachment, nearly forgot its name. You very rarely see that have more than the 2 HQs and the free troops and then a couple of other units. You never see somebody fill out the detachment. They'll all just take another detachment instead, and that gains them more command points. Whereas if you think about it, having a cohesive army should give it more command points. So having a fully fleshed out, rounded army should be rewarded more. So I think the way they're going to do that is they'll charge you for extra detachments. So say you take a battalion and then you also want to take a patrol, even if it's from the same codex, then you pay a couple of extra command points. If you want to take a patrol from an allied codex, you might pay 4 command points. So you're paying an extra cost to ally in other stuff. I think it adds a whole extra balance to the game, and I'm really looking forward to it. Let's hope they do something like that.
Exactly that, Mike. I've got to say, I agree. If I was a betting man, I'd put money on that being pretty close to how it's going to turn out. You're going to buy detachments with from a pool of command points that you start with, I think, and probably pay for things like tactical reserves. But we'll see as we move on through the video. Point 4, tanks are back on track. If there is a silliness in 8th edition, it is that a single model can go into melee combat with a very powerful vehicle, knowing that it's quite unlikely to be killed in melee by that model and preventing it from firing in a subsequent turn. That is silly. I understand it was trying to suggest the idea that, you know, sort of models scrambling all over your tank, you can't really fight effectively. But it got very, very cheesy, especially as part of kind of consolidation and piling moves. People just touching a vehicle, you know, it would massively reduce its effect. It needs to be handled with care, I think, how they implement this, but it's worth discussing. Let's hear from Mr. James Workshop, the original James Workshop, of course.
Hello and good day. My name is James Workshop, and I am here to tell you about one thing I did like and one thing I didn't like quite so much, my opinion of course, about the video that was just released a couple of days ago named 9 Great Things About the New Edition. Let's have a look. So I'll start first with this section, Tanks Are Back on Track. I generally play combat armies, and basically the only way in which you can stop vehicles from moving is by locking them in combat. So I'm a little bit concerned that if you can shoot the unit that you are engaged with, which I doubt will be the rules, that could be problematic. Even if not, you're going to have to be very careful around the rules for the difference between, say, a walker and a general tank vehicle, whatever you want to call it. I think it's going to have to be very careful, which is more rules, which is kind of against the thinking of the game. So I imagine it's going to be something simple and a little bit scarcely powered, like a little scarily overpowered. But you never know. Let's have a look at what I think I like about this set of rules, though.
Thank you, James. really depends on implementation of this, but it is an interesting idea, and it was nice to hear from somebody who is a melee-focused, slow-moving army, which you often play things like Nurgle, where these rules have been quite important for you to be able to compete. So we'll have to see how it pans out. Point 5, terrain. Terrain in 8th edition has been garbage. It didn't have default high-level blanket rules on area terrain and things, but people tended to interpret the ruins rule as printed in the book as being pretty much what they were going to use for any terrain. There are terrain rules in the back of 8th edition for woods and swamps and pipes and all kinds of things, and nobody used them. And that tells you that those rules are garbage. Exactly how these new rules are going to work, I'm not so sure. But Clueless Mike has got some thoughts.
Terrain. This has been a bugbear of many a person throughout the entire of 8th edition. The terrain rules just aren't very in-depth. They're not very clear is my main issue with them. They don't really allow various different units to interact. Things like a knight walks up to the side of the building, has to use a stratagem to hit somebody standing on the second floor with his giant chainsaw he could just cut through the building with. So I think they need to give much more in-depth rules for it. I mean, the rules for ruins are kind of like a paragraph or so. That's not enough rules to interact with a massive bit of scenery with all the different unit types in 40k. So hopefully they're going to do that kind of thing. They need to do ruin rules that are good and thematic. They mentioned in the video about defending the pieces of terrain. I think that can really be worked on well. They need to make area terrain worth something. Okay, you do get +1 to your armor save, but in modern 40k, you either have line of sight blocking scenery that you can't be shot through because that gives you protection, or it's pretty worthless. Like a stand with a couple of trees on, you just don't use those nowadays because the rules for them just don't really have any meaningful effect. So I'm not sure what they're going to do. I suspect they might bring in negatives to hit as well as bonuses to armor saves. Hopefully they'll bring in different kind of like levels of density of terrain, that kind of thing. It's a fine balance because the rest of 8th edition and hopefully 9th edition is going to continue in this is quite a streamlined rule set. So you don't want a massive thick rule book trying to describe all these things, but you need a bit more granularity and a bit more effect from your terrain. But I don't want to go back to the old cover saves used to get, whereas hiding behind a little bit of something gave you a 4-up save, so it's nearly as good as power armor, just hiding behind a bit of brush. So we'll see.
Thank you, Mike. Certainly one to watch for. I think to hit modifiers are going to be a bigger part of the game as we move forwards, which is an interesting design mechanism. I'm not sure how I feel about that. We'll have to see the implementation. Point 6 is about game scaling. Given the fact that we tend to play 30 power level games here on the channel, I'm really interested to see more work being done on the smaller game. I think sometimes it comes across maybe in the wrong way that why we tend to play smaller games on the channel. There's a number of reasons, but absolutely top of that list, it's just the time it takes to play. This game takes a long time to play, and I would prefer to play a game taking an hour and a half that finished rather than one that takes 4 that I didn't finish. That's my thinking on it. But James Workshop has got some ideas. Thank you, James.
One thing that I definitely like about this set of rules, however, assuming they get it right, is the scalability of it. At the moment, it's a little difficult to play games at different levels. So we've been playing 30 power as the standard power that we have on the channel, and I think that works great. It has a new style of meta, and it just works a little differently than the standard larger game that you would have. So I'm hoping that they can make the rules work to scale in the manner that we already enjoy, frankly. So that's that section from me. You'll have a variety of other people talking about the other sections. I do have quite strong opinions. I think command points positive, maximum blasts, have to be very careful with that. But overall, I'm actually quite enjoying it. So yeah, that's the new changes for 9th edition. I hope you enjoy it, as I'm sure I will, along with everybody else on the channel. And thank you very much for watching.
Thanks for that, James. Let's have a look at point 7, which is about strategic reserves and some thoughts from Clueless Mike.
Tactical reserves. So they're saying that it's going to be more tactical and probably more reservy. How's it going to work? Well, none of us know as yet. What could they do? I don't think they'll go back to the old method of randomising when you come in, because I think that's something that people really don't miss. I think they've got to stick with the 9 inches, because that's on all the data sheets. If they change the 9 inches, then they'd have to change every data sheet. And they might be willing to do that, but I'm not sure they will. I think what's probably going to happen is that you'll be able to pay command points to alter when your turn comes in. I think there might be a little thing at the start of the game where you kind of like secretly write down when your units are coming in, so it adds a little sub game to reserves before the game, and then you can alter that by spending command points. There's loads of stuff they could do, but fitting it in with the current rules written on data sheets, that becomes slightly more problematic. They might bring back the old different types of reserves, so they might keyword in deep strike, outflank, coming on from the back of reserves. One thing I expect they'll do is they'll bring in a couple more generic stratagems. So there'll be a stratagem you can always play to hold a unit back in reserve. You always used to be able to keep a unit off the table at the start of the game and then bring it on from turn 2 onwards. But in 8th edition that changed, though. You had to have strategic reserve special rules to be able to do so. So I fully expect they'll bring that back. You can pay command points to hold units off the field. That's one of the ways to make it a bit more tactical. But again, let's have to wait and see. Hopefully they're going to start doing more previews and stuff in the next couple of weeks. I, for one, cannot wait.
Point 8 is on explosive weapons then. Explosive weapons will be doing maximum damage against hordes, it says. There's a few points to consider here. What counts as an explosive weapon and what counts as a horde. But let's hear for a moment from Clueless Mike.
Explosive weapons do maximum number of hits versus hordes. This sounds great, but there's a little bit to unpack about that. First of all, what do they mean by explosive weapons? I take it to mean anything that used to be explosive and has now been converted into a random number of hits. So any weapons that do kind of like assault D6, heavy D3, that kind of thing, that's an explosive weapon. Whether they include flamers in that, not sure. I'm hoping they do. I'm assuming they would. I'm hoping they might have added something else extra for kind of like spray weapons. But do maximum hits to units, so that's going to have various different effects. First of all, it's going to make hordes worse. And also, what counts as a horde? I personally suspect any unit with more than 10 models, like you'd never describe a tactical squad as a horde. But so 11 plus maybe even 20 plus possibly. There aren't that many units that can do that though, so whether it would have an effect. It would also balance those weapons out. At the minute, people hate any random. And weapons that are designed to kill hordes actually end up being better at killing kind of like single models. Like a flamer's really good against a single model, not particularly good versus a horde, because weird. So hopefully this will go a little way to fixing that, but time will tell.
Yeah, Mike, thank you for that. So the final point that we've got for you is freedom of the skies. There's a suggestion that the way aircraft work is going to change. They describe it as making planes feel more like aircraft. But it seems to be aimed at addressing this problem of aircraft bases having a footprint on the table and how other models interact with that footprint has been a real problem in terms of movement blocking big melee units like Imperial Knights, for example. There's been some real tournament cheese around this because a man cannot stand under an aeroplane and the aeroplane is in the middle of the table. It sounds like they're doing something where perhaps the vehicle will have its launch position, it will move, fight, and then come back. Something of that nature. Precisely how that's implemented is yet to be seen, but they do mention that they have tried to address that problem. So we're going to have some final thoughts from Johnny B on point number 9, is freedom of the skies. But also, it's worth me mentioning at this point that I am now about to lose control of the show, because Johnny B is going to do the closing segment, and I don't know quite what he's going to do. Let's hope he behaves himself.
So back to me for point 9, which is the aircraft. Okay, so no longer will they be flying around like the little fly in your front room around the light. For me, flies hit it big in 7th edition. 7th edition. And they really sort of, it's the first time I've really seen flyers on the field, and they were big then. In 8th edition, I can honestly say I've not actually seen much of the flyer on the tabletop. No doubt they're still pretty good, as they talk about it a lot. I think, possibly, who knows? I don't. But it does sound like they're making them less gamey in the sense that you can't deny ground movement by having a big fat oval base. It just doesn't make any sense, and having them crash or leave the combat zone by leaving the board is a bit crap, especially when you've spent, like, you know, anywhere, I don't know what planes are like now, 45, 65 quid on a model that can potentially literally just flop off the edge of the world. So it's good that they've adjusted that and bringing it back so that the old flyers can come back in. Got nothing to show you here, but that's my thoughts. Very little thoughts, because I rarely have them, and that's point 9. So back to you, Kaiser. Kaiser? Oh shit. Okay, so he's fallen asleep again. Don't blame the old boy, he's knocking on a bit now. So it looks like I'm seeing you guys out. That's all we have time for this week, or weekend, or whenever this is coming out. Thank you for watching. It's mostly stuff you've already heard, but not from us. And, you know, stay home, keep safe, look after each other. Simples. Well, for most of us, eh? Bye!
Please remember to like, comment, share or subscribe this video, and if you are buying new games or new miniatures, please consider following our affiliate link to Wayland Games. It gives us a little bit of kickback and helps fund other projects for the channel. Thank you for watching! Edition. As you probably know, the Fake Games Workshop bugger.
Kaiser? Kaiser! Shit. Looks like it's me for the outro, folks. He's an old boy now, so he does fall asleep quite a bit. Kaiser! Shit. So, I mean, yeah. He's knocking on a bit now, you know? He does keep telling me his age, but I mean, my father was born in 44 and looks younger, so I'm not sure he's telling the truth. I mean, it is tough up north, I've heard, past the Watford Gap. Like, full of barbarians, and it's just a wasteland, essentially. I've never travelled, though, really. Just sort of around the block a couple of times, literally round the block. So yeah, I guess it just must be the conditions up north.
Could you just check that that's switched on? I'm sure it is. Yeah. Okay.
You're still where you should be.
I'm still where I should be, give or take. So you can take him out and close the door and take him downstairs, yeah?
Yeah.
Please. Shoot! Shoo! Bye. Hello and welcome. I am the Restless Kaiser, and once again, we are modelling for Advantage.